So again, thank you for joining us. Fermentation really is one of my favorite topics, and it's something that I like to do a lot on the side outside of work. So I hope everything in this webinar will give you a little more confidence to get started at home, so you can have some safe, healthy, delicious ferments. So before refrigeration, canning, and other modern techniques became available, fermentation was an important preservation method. And now it's seeing a revival as more people are learning how to brew their own beer and bake their own sourdough bread. So what exactly is it, and how do we safely ferment our food at home? Well, fermentation is simply the process in which a substance breaks down large chains like starches and amino acids into their constituent parts. Bacteria, yeast, and mold are the substances that do all of the work for us. Now, once these large chains, like starches, are broken down into simple sugars, foods become more obviously delicious. Now, there's a thin line between rot and fermentation, so we have to create an ideal environment for fermentation to safely occur. As you can see, there are various types of fermentation, so we'll be focusing our attention on lacto-fermentation for the purposes of this presentation. But before we get into the specifics of lacto-fermentation, let's take a quick look at the different foods that can be fermented and some examples from around the world. So most people probably think of beer or wine when they hear the term fermentation, but the truth is there are many more foods that are fermented than we likely realize, including cheeses, yogurt, sauerkraut, olives, salami, and then we have our coffee and hot chocolate as well. So when you're thinking about things to ferment, keep all of these different categories in mind. You have dairy, drinks like kombucha, water kefir, fruits and vegetables, which we'll be spending a lot of our time on today, meat and fish, grains, breads, as well as condiments and legumes like soybeans. There's many reasons why people may be experimenting more with this ancient practice. They may be trying to keep alive old traditions, or maybe they're wanting to create foods with complex flavors, or maybe to reap the health benefits of the probiotics that are present. But it's also a safe and easy way to preserve food at home with very little startup costs. Food fermentation is one of the earliest technologies developed by humans. Research on these origins date back to the primitive pottery age between 8,000 to 3,000 BC in Asia, involving withered sea vegetables stored in seawater and alcohol from fermented fruits. Now, nearly every civilization has included at least one fermented food in its culinary heritage. These different food products are a result of either natural fermentation or through the addition of a starter culture, and we'll get more into those details later. But different bacterial and yeast species are present in each case, which will contribute to the unique flavors and textures present in the end product. Let's take a look at some of these foods and the countries in which they are believed to originate and remain popular to this day. So first up, we have sourdough. The use of leavening was discovered and recorded by the Egyptians, as proved by wall paintings and analyses of desiccated bread loaves and beer remains. To start your own sourdough at home, you simply mix equal parts flour and water with repeated feedings until the mixture begins to bubble, indicating it is active and ready to use. So this is an image of a sourdough starter. I started probably 2 years ago now. His name was Herman, and I gave him a lot of flour, a lot of feedings. So keep in mind that the temperature of your house is a huge factor in a healthy ferment. So I went through so much flour. I wasn't understanding why it wasn't getting bubbly and active, but it was in the winter. My house was on the chilly side, so I stuck the ferment into the oven with just the pilot light on, and that was enough heat to get it bubbly and active. So the next day I was then able to use that for different breads and things. So just a few degrees can have a huge impact on your ferment. Next up, we have yogurt. Yogurt is a good example where you can purchase a starter culture to ferment milk and also dairy alternatives like soy milk. It refers it differs from vegetable ferments because it requires heat in addition to acidity. And there are many fermented dairy products on the market that you can find, including Skyr, Yakult, kefir, buttermilk, Levna, all with varying flavor profiles and texture. The first ferment I started with was sauerkraut, and this is a good one for beginners. It's just cabbage and then whatever flavor additions you would like to add. Some common ones include caraway, juniper berries, apples. There's a variety of spices that you can use. One of my favorite recipes is called golden sauerkraut, and it uses the spice turmeric in addition to ginger root and a whole lot of garlic. And this is one of the recipes that I will be sending to you after the presentation. Kimchi is originating, from Korea. There are many variations, but typically it is made with Chinese cabbage, Asian radishes, along with other vegetables. And red pepper paste and anchovy is what gives it a unique flavor profile. And unlike sauerkraut, kimchi is going to be a little more carbonated due to the process. So I haven't made this at home, but I do like to buy it from time to time. It comes in the mild and hot varieties. It's great as a side dish, and you can also stir fry it with rice, vegetables, and proteins. Like kimchi, there are many variations of chutney, which originates from India. They can be dry, wet, sweet, sour, or spicy, but most of the kinds that you'll buy in the store today are made with vinegar and sugar. Unlike sauerkraut, chutneys can be fermented in just a few short days, whereas sauerkraut may take 4 weeks or longer. So chutney is a great short project that you can get started with. Dosa is another fermented food from India, kind of like a thin crepe, but it's made with fermented rice and lentils. And India is the only country that I know of that explicitly encourages the consumption of fermented foods in their nutritional guidelines. And I think this would be something great to have the United States, since there are so many benefits to eating fermented food products. All right, next up we have kefir, which originated in the northern parts of the Caucasus Mountains in Russia. Traditional kefir was made in goatskin bags that were hung near a doorway. The bags would be knocked by anyone passing through to keep the milk and kefir grains well mixed. Now you can purchase it from the grocery store or make it yourself easily on the kitchen counter, and it just takes a night to culture. The taste is slightly sour on its own, so I like to add it to smoothies with a little bit of fruit and maybe spinach in there. The store-bought version is far less sour and tastes great on your oatmeal in the morning. For non-dairy drinkers, water kefir is also a tasty alternative, and they both utilize kefir grains. One is made specifically for dairy, the other is made specifically for water. And if you purchase these online, they will be in their dehydrated form, so you will have instructions on how to rehydrate them and then use them for your future culturing projects. Pickles and relish are a common fermented food in the United States. Advances in processing have allowed for the mass production of pickle products. You will see processed and fresh packed pickles on the shelf. Fresh packed have not undergone any fermenting, unlike the processed variety. So the two images on the right, those are fresh packed, and your container will tell you if it's fresh packed or not. If you get a chance, head on over to YouTube. You can find some videos on how they produce these pickles on a large scale, and it's really fascinating if you get the chance to check that out. All right, so that brings us to lacto-fermentation. So this is a safe, economical, easy way to preserve food, and it's been around for centuries. This process will impart ordinary vegetables with extraordinary flavors. The characteristic sour taste of these foods come from the lactic acid bacteria responsible for this process. Now, all fruits and vegetables have beneficial bacteria, such as lactobacillus, on their surface. In an anaerobic or an oxygen-free environment, these bacteria convert sugars into lactic acid, which inhibits harmful bacteria and also acts as a preservative for your food. It's also what gives fermented foods a characteristic sour flavor. These are some images of fermented foods that I have created in the past year or so. On the left-hand side, that's a picture of cortito, which is a Southwestern style sauerkraut. Moving up to the top, that's a bowl of lemon yogurt with lacto blueberries. I made this past week, and that was really different. I also put those blueberries in some muffins with oats, and that came out really well. Moving to the right, those are the ingredients that you need to make water kefir. So you just need those kefir grains, sugar, and spring water or filtered water will work. And after 2 to 3 days, you will have water kefir. Moving down, that is a loaf of sourdough banana bread. And the 2 jars, you'll see lacto-fermented carrots with garlic and also red cabbage with apples. So there's lots of different things you can do with fermented foods. And this is just an example of some of those. There's 3 methods of culturing. With natural fermentation, you rely entirely on the wide set of lactic acid bacteria in the environment, resulting in a diverse and complex product. This is how fermentation was first performed. We also have backslopping. This is giving your ferment a boost of beneficial microbes by adding a dose from the previous batch. The process for making kombucha is a good example of this because you will always leave a little bit from the last batch to add to the new batch of kombucha. The picture on the right is what kombucha looks like, and that substance that he's pulling out is a SCOBY. That is your colony of bacteria and yeast that will ferment your sweetened tea. And then there are also many starter cultures you can purchase online, or you can get free from friends if they have extra. If you're looking to make things like sourdough, kefir, yogurt, you can get starter cultures for all of these. So again, fresh vegetables naturally contain bacteria, yeast, and mold that will eventually spoil them if left sitting out on the counter. But some bacteria and yeast present on the vegetables are key players in the fermentation process, but they are just present in lower numbers and really don't grow as fast. So our goal then is to create an environment where the lactic acid producing bacteria can flourish so the spoilage microorganisms cannot grow. So since labs grow in anaerobic and salty conditions, we must reduce the oxygen around the vegetables and add salt or brine to encourage the labs to grow and overpower the spoilage microorganisms. These 3 species listed here are mainly responsible for producing the characteristic byproducts of fermented vegetables. During the fermentation process, the labs will produce byproducts that will aid in preservation. Starches and sugars in vegetables and fruits are converted into lactic acid, which again is a natural preservative, inhibiting spoilage and pathogenic bacteria. The carbon dioxide produced helps maintain the low oxygen conditions that fermenting bacteria need, as well as stabilizing the flavor and color of your vegetables, keeping them beautiful for months to come. You can tell if there's carbon dioxide being formed in your jar by looking to see if there's bubbles. If you see bubbles after 2 to 3 days, that means your ferment is healthy and on the right track. During most vegetable fermentations, the fermenting bacteria usually do not grow and produce compounds at the same time, but rather follow in a sequential order, with each group of bacteria providing the next group with the right conditions to continue. So the longer it ferments, the more acidic it's going to be, allowing for those acid-loving bacteria to flourish. There's lots of benefits to lacto-fermentation. Again, it's a safe, easy way to preserve food. You will also be getting some probiotics. These are beneficial bacteria that help grow and maintain your gut microbiome. So eating fermented foods can improve your gut health. Keep in mind that not all fermented foods you buy in the store will contain live probiotics. So make sure you check the label for live active cultures. You will also see specific strains that will be present in your fermented food, and it will vary depending on the ferment you are purchasing. The action of the bacteria makes the minerals in cultured foods more readily available to the body, and they also help produce certain vitamins, including the B vitamins, and they preserve the vitamins A and C. The yeast called Saccharomyces cerevisiae, this is found in your sourdough bread. It's able to concentrate large quantities of minerals, including thiamine, nicotinic acid, and biotin, thus forming an enriched bread product. Fermented foods are also often more easily digestible than your unfermented foods due to the enzyme action. Now, like other types of food preservation, you want to start with the end in mind. Consider how you will use this product and how much you will need. It can be fun to try your hand at new ferments, but make sure you have a purpose so you don't end up with 7 jars of experiments in the back of your fridge that you'll never eat. And like other types of preservation, always start with food ingredients that are free from decay. Fresh ingredients will always yield a more desirable end product. So this includes your vegetables, your fruits, and also the herbs and spices that you are adding for flavor. These are some tools that will be useful during the fermentation process. And as you're looking over these, you'll probably notice that you have a lot of these already lying around your kitchen. So we'll be looking at these in a little more depth in the following slides. The first step is to make sure that your hands, your containers, equipment, and your food contact surfaces are cleaned. So you should wash them first with hot soapy water before you begin. Sanitizing is another crucial step. If chlorine bleach is used, the equipment should be rinsed really well to remove any residues, since they can inhibit your good fermenting bacteria from growing. There's other methods of sanitizing. You can do the boiling method, the oven, or you can purchase sanitizers made specifically for food and beverage production. One example of this would be Star San. It's a food-safe sanitizing product that you can pick up from a home brew store if you have one in your community, or you can purchase one online. But it works really well to sanitize things that can't be sanitized by other means. There are probably various other brands out there, but this is just the one that I am most familiar with. So when we get to chopping and cutting, what you will need will be determined by what your final product will be. So let's say you're wanting to make sauerkraut. If you have a sauerkraut board, I would recommend this. It does a really nice job in getting that cabbage thinly sliced, very finely. Something else that works well would be a food processor or a mandolin. If you don't have those, you can get away with using a sharp knife, but it probably won't get your cabbage sliced as thin, but it will still do the job. When it comes to pounding tools, you have a few options. My favorite choice is just my clean hands, or sometimes I will put on gloves. But this purpose is just to extract as many natural juices as you can from the shredded vegetables. You can also use potato masher, a vegetable pounder, a meat hammer, etc. They all work really well. So there's lots of different fermentation vessels you can use. Now, as a general rule, you can fit 5 pounds of shredded vegetables of any sort into a 1-gallon container. So think about how much you want to end up with when you're deciding the size of vessel that you are using. Metal containers are not recommended unless you are using a high-grade commercial stainless steel. You can use the number 2 plastic containers because those are free from EPA. My favorite is just using a glass jar of some sort. You can use a smaller quart size canning jar. I have a 1-gallon, and I also have a 3-gallon glass vessel that I like to use. And I like to use glass because I can see exactly what's going on during the fermentation process. If you were using the smaller vessels, it's probably good to use the wider mouth jars so it's easier to get the food in and out. But whatever vessel you are going to use, this will determine what kind of weight that you will need. And we will get more to the weights in just a little minute. If you are using the Mason style jars, you want to trade those metal rings and bands in for plastic, if you have them. I have heard of some people using wood. I wouldn't recommend these. They're just really difficult to clean and sanitize. So if you do end up using wood, you will likely have mold growth during your fermentation process. Ceramic crocks are a great option. They're beautiful, they're made specifically for this job, and they usually come with weights already. There's various sizes and shapes. Just make sure that the paint or glaze that was used does not contain lead, because it will leach into your final products. So airlocks. So this is not something that is mandatory, but I highly, highly recommend picking up an airlock for your ferment. There's different kinds, but they all essentially do the same thing. So they allow that carbon dioxide that's being created, it allows that to escape, but it keeps oxygen out. Now, if you weren't using an airlock, you will likely have to burp your jar regularly to allow that CO2 to escape. But when you have an airlock, you don't have to burp that jar, thus not allowing any oxygen into your vessel. So this will help prevent unwanted mold growth. And just keep in mind that if you are using an airlock, you will still need to use weights because it's essential to keep your vegetables submerged. You want to keep your vegetables 1 to 2 inches below the brine level for safety and proper fermentation. This is essential. Weighting the vegetables will help ensure the vegetables stay submerged, decreasing their exposure to oxygen. And just to make sure you allow a little room at the top for expansion due to gas buildup. So in that photo with the carrots, you'll see that I think that's a 3-gallon glass jar. So it's only filled halfway full, allowing for the plate, which prevents any floaters from flying up. And then also another mason jar filled with brine. And that is set on top of the weight to weigh the vegetables down. In the bottom picture, I have glass weights like that. And those are made specifically for your smaller pint and quart size jars, and they work very well. So let's look at some other options of weights. There's lots of options. Again, the ceramic weights, this will come with your ceramic crock if you purchase one of those. Tempered glass weights work really well, especially for the smaller jars, and they're easy to clean. Whiskey stones, these are also good for smaller vessels. These are food safe and should be heavy enough to hold most of your ferments down. Ceramic pie weights can be a good option. Just make sure you have some that you use separately for your ferments, and if you do bake pies, you might want to have a separate batch for those pies so you're not crossing those. But you will want to keep these in a bag so they're not flying around in your fermentation vessel. One of my favorite options is to use a plastic bag filled with brine. I'll get a freezer bag usually and fill it with brine, and I'll set that on top of a plate inside my larger container. So again, when I'm using that 3-gallon size glass container, this is my favorite option. You also see cabbage there. So cabbage leaves can be another alternative. So if you don't have a plate or a plate that fits to the outside of your jar, you can just use a cabbage leaf that kind of acts as your plate, keeping floaters down, and then put your brine-filled bag on top of that. And then there's newer things coming out all the time. This is the pickle pushing no float jar packer. But for some of these newer options, they are going to run you a little bit more money. So there's lots of different weights available to you, so you can choose whatever works best for you and your budget. Proper fermentation temperatures allow for the labs to grow and prevent growth of spoilage bacteria. Fermentation is best achieved at 68 to 72, although the range from 60 to 78 can work as well. High fermentation temperatures create a fast fermentation where some types of lactic acid bacteria just can't grow at all, resulting in less fermentation byproducts and then a less complex flavor. And keep in mind, if the temperature is too high, spoilage bacteria may take over and ruin your fermentation, leading to spoiled and softened vegetables. So it's always a good idea to take note of the room temperature. And you can also purchase these temperature strips, which are great to place on the outside of your glass jars. I usually use these when I'm making water kefir because the kefir grains have to, again, be around that 68 to 70 degrees. And when I'm adding my water to the vessel, I want to make sure it's within that range. Salt is very essential. It has lots of different roles. It allows needed water and sugars to be pulled from the vegetables, which are used as nutrients by the fermenting organisms. It favors the growth of fermenting organisms over spoilage bacteria, yeast and mold, as well as harmful bacteria. It allows for crisper vegetables by hardening the plant pectins. and it decreases the activity of pectinase, which is an enzyme that makes your vegetables mushy. It allows for longer fermentation by slowing the fermentation process and decreasing the chance of undesirable mold growth. And of course, it gives flavor to the final products. Salt concentration is very important in fermentation. Therefore, salt amount should be measured carefully and a tested recipe should be followed. Your recipe will tell you how much salt to use. I have seen some recipes that will tell you, 2 to 3 tablespoons. Others will tell you a weight. So if you have a scale, this will give you the most precise measurement, but just follow your recipe in any case and you should be fine. Salt concentrations in vegetable fermentations can vary from 1 to 15% and are usually specific for what you are fermenting. Generally, for your shredded sauerkraut type fermentations, you'll see around 2.5 to 3%, whereas your pickle fermentations or whole vegetable fermentations will be slightly higher, 3, 5, up to 10%. There are various ways that we can add salt. So the first is direct or dry salting. This is when salt is added directly to the vegetables. After mixing in the salt, you may want to leave it sitting for 20 minutes or so, allowing that natural pull to happen. Otherwise, you can massage the vegetables, and this can help speed up the process and is a fantastic workout for your hand muscles. This step usually takes me 10 to 15 minutes to get enough liquid pulled out of those vegetables to cover them once they're transferred to the container. So just be patient, it will happen. Using your fist or a vegetable pounder, you can then apply some weight to pack the vegetables down below the brine. And if for some reason you still don't have enough brine to cover your vegetables, you can make your own by warming up 1 quart of water and 1.5 tablespoons of salt, and then letting that cool completely before adding it to your ferments. All right, the second method is brining. So this is just mixing salt and water to form brine before adding to your vegetables. This technique can allow for better coverage of the vegetables, which lessens the risk of fermentation failure and is best for whole or quarter pieces. So which salt is the best? There are so many choices out there. The salt used in fermentation should be free from additives. So anti-caking additives in table salt will lead to a cloudy brine. Iodine in iodized salt can turn your vegetables kind of a brownish color and slow the fermentation down, so we don't want that. And use of reduced sodium salt is definitely not recommended. What I like to use is canning or pickling salt. This is a great choice simply because it contains no impurities and it has a consistent granular size and weight. Water quality is another essential factor to consider in addition to salt. Tap water usually contains chlorine, chloramines, fluoride that needs to be removed before filtering. You can remove the chlorine by boiling or aerating it, since chlorine is unstable, but it's more difficult to get the chlorine and fluoride out. So I wouldn't recommend tap water unless you are using a filter of some sort. So filtered water, spring water, that's going to be your best bet for fermentations. Since distilled water is void of everything, I would not recommend that either. So everybody's probably wondering how they can prevent mold growth. Nobody wants to see mold on their precious fermented foods, so here are several tips to help you prevent mold from growing. Number 1, use a jar with an airlock lid. So this will help ensure that no oxygen is getting into your jar, but at the same time, allowing that carbon dioxide to escape without having to burp your jar along the way. Number 2, keep your food submerged below the brine level. This is essential. Remember, 1 to 2 inches, your vegetables should be below that brine, making sure that it stays in that anaerobic or that oxygen-free environment. Number 3, control room temperature. So you want to see around 68 to 70, and you can also keep track of the temperature inside your vessel with the stick-on temperature strip. Number 4, always use the freshest produce. This will result in a better product in the end. Fresh produce, fresh spices, everything you're using, fresh is going to be the best. Number 5, use the correct amount of salt. Make sure you follow your tested recipe and either follow what it says by tablespoon, and even better yet, make sure it's weighed for a more precise salinity. And number 6, make sure everything is super clean and sanitized. This includes your hands, your containers, any pieces of equipment, your weights that you're using, your food contact surfaces, everything should be nice, clean, and sanitized. So when should you move your ferment to cold storage? This is a common question when fermenting at home, but luckily your recipe should let you know when your ferment is ready for cold storage. But again, temperature in your house could play a part in this as well. So there's 3 signs to look for. You want to see that bubbling action. This is a sign that you have a healthy ferment because that CO2 is being developed. You want a nice aroma. The ferment should have a slightly sour, tangy smell to it. If it smells spoiled or rotten, you'll know. And if it does, make sure you discard it. And always, when in doubt, throw it out. And then finally, once a vegetable ferment appears gaseous or bubbly and smells sour but pleasing, it's a good time to give it a little taste. And depending on the type of vegetable that you're fermenting, varying ranges of fermented flavors may be present. The fermentation process has many stages, so different flavors will develop over time. And after you move the ferment to the refrigerator, new flavors will continue to develop over time since the process slowly continues, even at that refrigeration temperature. For best quality and a healthy dose of probiotics, you want to eat your ferment within 3 to 4 months. It's likely that your ferment will be preserved a lot longer than that, but the good bacteria will die off over time. You can also freeze your ferments if you made more than you can handle in that time frame. All right, so thinking about incorporating more fermented foods into our diets, and how do we do that? So I'm going to show some examples of some things that I like to eat involving fermented ingredients. So this is just oatmeal topped with kefir. This is store-bought kefir. There's lots of flavors. There's vanilla, blueberry, that's my favorite. They have plain if you don't want the added sugar. This is also great in smoothies. You can make a wrap or a sandwich and throw in some sauerkraut. You can make your own. You can use store-bought or other fermented vegetables that you have. You can have a taco night, and as one of your toppings, throw in some lacto jalapenos. You can try miso soup if you haven't already the next time you go to a Japanese restaurant. And this is something easy you can make at home as well. You just have to purchase some miso paste, which is a fermented soybean paste. And some lemon yogurt topped with lacto fruit, like lacto blueberries. And again, these taste great as a topping. You can also puree the blueberries, you can blend them, and then use that as a topping for your grilled meats or corn on the cob. So due to the availability of fermented foods in supermarkets and the ease of making them at home, it should be fairly easy for people to include more of these items into their diets. Yogurt is a good place to start, but I encourage everyone to try a variety of fermented foods and beverages, which will ensure you're getting a diverse range of helpful bacteria. Now, I don't have any beverages listed here, but again, water, kefir, and kombucha are a great place to start and readily available in the grocery stores. All right, so let's do a little recap with some key takeaways. We covered a lot of information pertaining to lacto-fermentation, and we know that it's a safe and easy way to ferment food. There's very little startup cost because you likely have a lot of the equipment already at home in your kitchens. There's a lot of health benefits. Fermented foods are easily digestible. You have an increase in B vitamins, and you have the preservations of vitamins A and C in there. Just remember to follow the safety steps outlined in the presentation and use quality ingredients. We talked about quality salt and water sources, so you end up with a safe and satisfying product that you can enjoy for months to come. And remember that cleaning and sanitizing is essential as well to help prevent that mold growth. So these are some additional resources relating to food preservation and fermentation. I can send this list of resources out to you in the follow-up email. So after the presentation today, you will receive a Qualtrics survey. So if you could take that, that would be great. Your honest feedback would be greatly appreciated. And once I have all of those collected, so next, I'll probably send out the follow-up email next Wednesday morning with the handouts for this lesson, in addition to these additional resources in case you are wanting to find any more information or even videos online on how to do some of these more specifically. All right, Diane. I have a few more slides, but are there any questions at this time that I can take?
You know, Kristen, thank you so much for the presentation today. We have been answering questions as we've been going along. And one question I haven't been able to find an evidence-based answer to is, how long does miso stay fresh when opened? So I don't know if you know that off the top of your head. So far what I found that if it's refrigerated, once it's been opened, a year. However, I have to investigate that a little bit more to find out where the source for that statement is. So I don't know if you know off the top of your head.
You know, I have miso paste in my refrigerator too, and I was wondering the same thing. So I will have to do a little investigating. But I would imagine it's quite a long time due to the process that it was created in. But that is one thing that I will write down to look up, and I can send that in our follow-up email as well.
All right. Another question is about tested recipes and the importance of using tested recipes.
Sure, yes.
So are there books that are out there that have the science to back up the recipes? A lot of people are concerned. And so what type of recommendations do you have, or are you able to send out a list with fermenting authors that you've used personally?
Sure, yeah. So the So Easy to Preserve 6th edition, as well as the National Center for Home Food Preservation website, these are usually our go-tos for food preservation. They have a little bit of information and recipes for fermented items. So we can share those websites and links in the follow-up email, or you can do a quick Google search for those. In addition, there are several books out there that have the science in them. So just look to make sure you are seeing that science base when you are looking at different fermentation books. You can check your library, you can purchase them online, read the reviews. Oftentimes others will give an honest review of that book. One of the books I have been using recently is the NOMA Guide to Fermentation, and I did see that in the chat box. That is an excellent resource. And one that I have really enjoyed reading and trying some of those recipes. Actually, that is where the lacto blueberry recipe came from. So I would recommend that. Otherwise, I can put together a list, and I can include that in the follow-up email as well.
Great, Kristen, thank you. So here's a question. How often do you need to burp sauerkraut if you do not have an airlock lid? Do your recipes usually tell you the specifics of that?
They should generally, for things that have a higher sugar content, like your kombuchas, of course, your fruit items, those have to be burped more often. But the sauerkraut, I would probably do every couple days or so. And if you don't have an airlock lid, it's recommended that you don't twist that lid on super tight. So if you leave it a little loose, it will allow some of that CO2 to escape. And I've also seen people using like coffee filters or something like that to put over the lid to keep, you know, little flies and little bugs from flying in, but still allowing that air to escape.
All right, thank you. Do you have a good source for an airlock lid? Or do you just kind of recommend, you know, everyone has to do their own homework, you know, because of course at the university we don't endorse any particular product, but is there a system of an airlock lid that you prefer?
I would check with, if you have a homebrew store in your community, I would definitely check with them. They can give you some good recommendations. Again, they all essentially do the same thing. So just make sure you know how to work it when they do provide it to you. Otherwise, if you don't have a homebrew store in your community, you can search online. And Amazon is usually a pretty good resource for equipment like this. And I have found several pieces that I have needed for my fermentations on Amazon. So you can do a search there and they will probably just run you $1 or so.
Okay, well, thank you. Another question is, well, this one, where can a person buy a kefir starter? Do you buy that at the brew store or where do you find that?
Sometimes you can find the starter cultures for kefir and kombucha at your grocery store. If you have a health market, they'll probably be in that area. Sometimes you can find them at health food stores if you have those in your community. Oftentimes you can find friends that have been making kefir. So maybe if you put a post online and say, hey, I'm looking for kefir grains. Does anybody have any they can share with me? Because it's kind of like friendship bread or sourdough. Over time, they will start growing and then you can give them away to your friends. So check with your friends. If you can't find anything locally that's fresh, you can purchase your dehydrated kefir grains online. There's probably various websites. One that comes to the top of my mind is called Cultures for Health. They have a lot of different starter cultures available, directions, as well as recipes, tutorials, and frequently asked questions, troubleshooting type things.
All right, so there was a question about alkaline water versus soft water, and someone else had, so I had written that, you know, soft water has kind of been, you're removing those hard calcium and hard water deposits that are commonly found in water. But what do you have to say about well water?
Well water is an option. You can use well water. Sometimes it can be contaminated, so just make sure it's tested regularly, but otherwise well water would be fine to use. If you don't want to use your tap water or your well water that's available in your home, just purchase some spring water. That would work as well.
Okay, and a lot of times well water, depending upon where you live, that's often really hard water as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I've typed it in, but I have gotten a couple different questions. So after today's webinar, we're going to go ahead and send out an email. It's going to contain an evaluation. In the evaluation, we're going to ask that you, enter your name in to receive the handouts. And then later next week, probably Wednesday to Friday next week, one day, Kristen's going to go ahead and send everyone who completed the evaluation and request the materials be sent to them. So we don't want to send out materials if people don't want them, but we'll go ahead and send that out. And so everyone should have received their handouts for the canning presentation we did 3 weeks ago. The freezing handouts will be sent out on Friday. And then again, Kristen will send her handouts out either, sometime after next Wednesday. All right, so our next question, how does alkaline water affect fermentation?
I haven't looked specifically at the process of alkaline water, so I can't give you a direct answer for that, how that it would affect it. My best guess is that it would just slow the process down and possibly not result in a safe end product. So,
okay. Do you know, can you grow your own SCOBY for kombucha from the store bought kombucha? So like if
I've heard that is possible. So if you do a backslapping with the store-bought, and if you see, you know, there might be a little tiny baby SCOBY in there, you can try putting that in a fresh batch of your brewed tea with the sugar. So again, follow that recipe, try backslapping it with some of the store-bought, and you might just be able to grow your own SCOBY.
Okay, let's see.
Lots of good questions.
Looking at questions, yeah. What do you look at when you evaluate a recipe for safety?
I usually look at to see the process. Since I've been doing fermentation for quite a while, I kind of know the steps and what bacteria are present. So I look to see, you know, are they suggesting cleaning and sanitizing? Are they suggesting keeping below the brine level? Do they have a set amount of days required for the process? And oftentimes they'll have sources cited. So I weigh lots of different variables.
Okay. All right. So did you say not to use distilled water?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yes, your best options are going to be like a filtered water or a spring water that you purchase from the grocery store.
Okay. And what did you say about freezing fermented foods?
Oh, so I think I was talking about moving to cold storage. So if you, let's say you've made, you know, a large amount of sauerkraut that you don't intend to eat and it's taking up too much room in your refrigerator, you can freeze that sauerkraut. You can freeze your other fermented foods as well.
Okay. Well, I think we've answered most of the questions. Again, there seems to be a lot of questions. So if you are interested in a class, so for example, the canning class was the first one in our series. Our canning class, it was recorded and we are waiting for the university to upload it to their YouTube channel. So we just have to wait. We kind of had hoped that within a 2-week window, they would be able to get those uploaded for us. However, there has been some delay and unfortunately we're not aware of the cost for that delay. And then the other issue is in order to get the handouts for your class, you have to complete the evaluation. If you don't complete the evaluation, more likely than not, we're not going to know to send those handouts to you. And the handouts for the canning class were sent out last Friday, and the handouts for the freezing class will be sent out this coming Friday. So if you want to go ahead and personally email me, I'm going to type my email into the chat box. After a minute, okay. All right, so my email is in the chat box, so you can go ahead and email me. Other than obvious signs of, this question's for you, Kristen, other than obvious signs of spoilage and yeast/bacteria growth, what are other signs that you should not eat the food?
If it's slimy, so again, if you're seeing visible signs of mold, clearly, you know, you would not want to eat the food. But if you see slimy vegetables, so if you're taking your vegetables out of the liquid and they're slimy, that would be a good indication not to eat them as well. Good question.
All right, well, it looks like we have answered the majority of the questions, and my email address is in the chat box. So feel free to send me an email. And Kristen, if you want to go ahead and advance the slides, we'll wrap things up here.
Yes, thank you. All right, so again, thank you everybody for tuning in today. This is a lot of fun, fermentation, and I hope you're able to join us next week for the next webinar in the home preservation series, which is drying foods at home. This is going to be the 24th of June from 1 to 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. And again, all of these recordings will eventually be housed on our website and our YouTube channel. If you're wanting to stay in touch with us through text, we have the Extending Wellness texting program. You can sign up by going to go.illinois.edu/wellness tips. You will get 1 to 2 texts per week on a variety of healthy living topics, and you can stop that at any time. So again, thank you for joining, and I'm going to leave this slide up for a few moments because there are some additional University of Illinois Extension resources here that you're able to explore. So again, thank you and have a wonderful day.